call the meeting to order. This is the Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting for Thursday, December 5th, 2013. The time is 7 o'clock. I'd like to welcome everyone here and everyone watching at home. And I would ask our clerk to please call the roll.
President Sells.
Here.
Trustee Sussman. Here. Trustee Hamilton. Here. Trustee Pollak.
Here.
Trustee Collins.
Here.
Trustee Foley.
Here.
Village Manager Scalera.
Here.
Village Attorney Molina.
Here.
Village Attorney Mars.
Here.
Also present Village Clerk Kathy Haley. Not with us tonight. Trustee Ballerine.
Thank you very much. We do have a quorum. If you'd please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. As always, everyone is welcome to speak at any time during our meeting. You can speak during public comment, or if you'd like to wait till a particular agenda item comes up, you're welcome to speak then as well. We do ask, however, that you come up to the podium, be recognized by the president, and that you state your name and address so the people at home will know who you are and what you're talking about. So first up this evening is public comment. Would anyone like to address the board? Mr. Gallegos.
Alex Gallegos, 3234 South Harlem. Good evening, Mr. President, trustees, those in attendance, and to those watching at home. Sir, I come before you and the Village Board on behalf of the Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure, sir, to inform the public of the upcoming Chamber events. The holiday season is getting into full swing. Tomorrow night is our annual holiday stroll. It begins at 5:30 with Santa Claus arriving at Centennial Park and a tree lighting at 6. He will then be at Riverside Bank for photos along with the West Ribbon Symphony players. Rudolph will be at PNC Bank. Fleur will be hosting retired football players at the bakery. Meet Emery Moorhead and John Juanita from the Bears and Mark Sullivan from the Buffalo Bills for autographs. There's also a chance to win a trip to Super Bowl and a silent auction for pro sports memorabilia. Sticky will have their Let There Be Lamps display. Jeff's Auto will have wood carving by Northern Exposure. Elves and Reindeer Treats at Doggy A Go-Go. Riverside Garage will have its famous train display, along with a petting zoo and pony rides. The Chicago Mustangs will have their players and dancers available for autographs. There'll be ice sculpting at the train station, sponsored by Gaslight Realty, Ivan's Funeral Home, and Molly's Irish Pub. Town Hall here will have the magic shows. Chris Newmer Photography will have his scenes displayed at Riverside at First American Bank. Higgins Glass will have their newest creations in the open house. Arcade Jewelers will have jewelry cleaning and care shows. Sventa Claus will be at the Comic Collector on Harlem Avenue. So use a trolley, which is sponsored by H&W Ingredients, and you use that to get out there and back. There are dozens of things happening tomorrow night, sir, and starts at 5:30, so I would encourage all residents to attend, dress very warmly, as winter has now arrived. And while this is a chamber event, this could not be done without the generous donations from the Swim Club, the St. Mary's Men's Club, Rock, Fusco, and Connolly, Cyber Toast, State Rep Mike Zalewski, State Senator Stephen Landeck, and of course Chairpersons Brian Brennan and Claudia Brennan as well. And we look forward to seeing everybody out there tomorrow night. That's all I have for today, sir. Thank you.
Anyone else like to address the board? Okay, moving on to reports of village officers. First up is a motion to appoint Brandy McNally to the Landscape Advisory Commission to fill a vacancy term to expire in 2015. I would ask for a motion and a second.
Motion.
Motion by Mr.
Second.
Foley, second by Ms.
Hamilton.
Hamilton. Any discussion? No, I would just like to thank Brandy for stepping up to join the Landscape Advisory Commission. She has a strong background and a lot of enthusiasm, and we look forward to working with her in the years to come. So I'd ask you to please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton. Aye. Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. And the only other thing that I would like to add tonight, and to follow up on what Mr. Gallegos was saying, and this is just to continue to mention the I Got It in Riverside campaign that you've seen around town, I hope, with all the posters of various residents holding various products. And if you haven't gotten your checklist yet, you can get these at businesses all over town, and as you're going around tomorrow night on the holiday stroll, you just have various businesses put a stamp beside their name. And once you get 10 of our local businesses to stamp your form, you can enter for a sweepstakes. And we have already over like $1,000 worth of gifts that various businesses have contributed in town. So I encourage you to take advantage of this and visit all of our local businesses tomorrow night. And that's all I have. Mr. Scalera?
I do not have a report this evening.
Next up is the approval of the consent agenda, and as the trustees can see, and those of you who might have looked at the packet ahead of time, there are a number of items on the consent agenda dealing with the year-end tax levies and most significantly the annual 2014 budget, both for the Village of Riverside and for the public library. There was a public hearing with regard to both of those items at our last meeting. Before we move to the consent agenda, would anyone in the public like to discuss any matters with regard to the budget? Okay. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Ms. Sussman, second by Ms. Hamilton. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Pollock.
She's seeing if you guys are awake. She's chasing it up on you. Motion carries. According to the agenda, we're supposed to next discuss the village's coyote policy, but with the indulgence of the trustees, I would ask that we take the first item under ordinances and resolutions for discussion. This was the one that was up for discussion last time because we had 2 trustees missing. We did not have the proper number of trustees to consider this item, so with no objection. So, Mr. Scalera, did you want to present this one?
Sure. Let me just find it. Okay. Good evening. This item is in regards to an ordinance authorizing the vacation of a portion of the 25-foot wide Parkway Terrace right-of-way lying immediately north of 575 Bird and 415 Berkeley, and north and east of 524 Berkeley Road. The village has the ability pursuant to Illinois Municipal Code to vacate previously dedicated right-of-way to adjacent properties. Several months ago, the village was approached by property owners on Bird and Berkeley concerning the possible vacation of portions of dedicated but unimproved right-of-way known as Parkway Terrace adjacent to their lots. After determining that it had no need to continue possession of the right-of-way in question, the village determined the fair market value of the lots and offered portions to 3 different owners at a price that reflected the value as well as the village's estimated costs related to vacating the right-of-way parcels. All 3 accepted the village's offers and have submitted deposits to the village. The village shall retain a utility and stormwater drainage easement over each of the vacated parcels. Upon approval of the ordinances, staff and the village attorney will move forward with finalizing the transactions with the owners, and upon payment of all remaining amounts due, the ordinance and plats will be recorded, at which time the right-of-way parcels will be officially vacated and become the property of the respective adjacent owners. I do know one of the owners is in the audience and available for any questions if the board has. This is an item that I, along with Village Attorney Mars, have been working on, and I do feel that it is in the best interest of the village to vacate these 3 parcels. They've just been sitting there, and it will not only benefit the village in the long run, but also benefit the homeowners in that area. And that is my presentation.
So procedurally, the way we will do this is by statute, each of these parcels requires a separate motion and a separate vote. So first, I will go through and ask for a motion and a second on all the various parcels, and after we do that, we'll open up the floor for anyone who would like to address the board on these matters. So first, I would ask for a motion and a second to authorize an ordinance for the vacation of a portion of the 20-foot wide Parkway Terrace right-of-way lying immediately north of 514 Berkeley Road, and approving a plat of vacation relating to said right-of-way.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Foley, second by Ms. Collins. Next is an ordinance authorizing the vacation of a portion of the 25-foot Parkway Terrace right-of-way lying immediately north of 575 Bird. I would ask for a motion in a second.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Sussman, second by Mr. Pollack. And lastly, a motion to vacate the portion of the Parkway Terrace right-of-way located north and east of 524 Berkeley.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hamilton,
Second.
second by Ms. Sussman. Now, with regard to discussion, would anyone like to address the board prior to the trustees discussing this? No? Trustees, any questions or comments?
No, I think it's a good idea.
All right. Okay, so then we will proceed with votes seriatim on these. First, I would ask you to call the roll with regard to 514 Berkeley Road.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now a roll call on the motion concerning 575 Bird Road.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. And lastly, the motion concerning 524 Berkeley.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton. Aye. Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you for those in attendance who came for the discussion this evening. And I apologize about last time when we had to put it off until this time. Okay, back to where we were. This is a continued discussion of the Village of Riverside coyote policy, and I would ask our Police Chief, Tom Weitzel, to please lead us through it.
Mr. President, trustees, and Manager Scalera, at the November 21st board meeting, after discussing my memorandum to the board asked me to come back with a protocol that Mr. Erickson would utilize if he was allowed to either trap with a snare device or allowed to call and shoot coyotes only that have the psychoptic mange or are diseased. I did have a conversation, as did Officer Jeff Miller, who's been working on this project with me, and we were informed by Mr. Erickson that what would need to be done would be, first of all, the police department would have to do some plotting of the patterns of the sick animals, which is what we've done already through resident calls, but we would have to put that into either a GSI format, which we have the availability to do, or some type of Excel sheet so he could get a pattern. So that would be the police department's part of his first look at the situation, and then if he would either come out for a week and decide if he would use this snare trap or the shoot and call and shoot if they observe the coyotes with the psychotic mange. The traps, he would have to get permits from the Department of Natural Resources before he could deploy them, which he would seek, and he's done in other communities. I asked him about the call and shoot method and what his procedure would be. He utilizes a weapon called a Metro gun. Its effective range for coyotes is 35 yards. The ammunition is low energy ammunition that is loaded by himself. It is what it is. It's 18 pellets of number 4 buckshot, and it dissipates at 35 yards. With the pattern that is held between when the gun is fired and the 35 yards is 18-inch pattern. So it holds an 18-inch pattern until it hits its target or dissipates. And there would be much more, there'd be some work that would have to be done with designee from the police department. So we'd have to walk him out to an area that these animals were spotted in, the sick animals. We'd have to show him the data that we have from the calls from our residents and police officer sightings. And then he would come up with a plan to either utilize the snare traps or the call and shoot. I did not have any calls from residents between the November 21st board meeting and today's board meeting. I did not receive any additional emails from any residents inquiring on one side or the other of the issue before the board. So my position is I would like to continue to ask the board for permission, basically, for our policy to be changed from exclusively hazing, which is the village's current policy, to if there is a pattern of a psychotic mange coyote, that we could utilize Mr. Erickson's services as he comes recommended by the Department of Natural Resources, specifically for that type of situation. I did have my own officers were a little bit confused after the November 21st board meeting, and I have a written directive out to my officers that they're not to discharge their own weapons to do anything more than protect their own life from an animal, a coyote, or to protect one of our residents' life, which they feel that their life would be immediately in danger. So I reissued that directive to my personnel. We don't currently have the type of rifles that would be, we could utilize. If there was an emergency situation, the officer would have to draw a service revolver. The type of weapons that we carry for heavy weapons are either larger shotguns or are a higher velocity rifle called an MP5, which would be inappropriate to use in this type of situation. So, as you can imagine, their handgun would be much more accurate only in a very short distance. It would not be something that our officers would use at a range. So I reiterated that policy with my personnel after the November 21st board meeting so that they were sure on what they could and couldn't do. So that's where I currently stand, and I can answer any other questions the board might have. Reference to sightings. Since the November 21st board meeting, we've had an additional 18 reported sightings of coyotes. Of those additional 18, 3 of them from residents reporting that the coyote had no hair. My officers did not see those. In any of those instances, by the time the officer arrived, the animal was gone.
Trustees?
Yes.
And the reason for removing these ill animals is because they're in pain? Is it, and because potentially they could infect domestic pets in town, is there any additional threat to residents? Because my understanding is that coyotes, well, okay, I mean, is there any other additional threat? Is there some reason other than pets or potential infection of pets and the discomfort of the animals that we would want to target these particular coyotes?
I was told by the Department of Natural Resources that they are not, even the psychotic mange coyote is not a hazard to humans. It
Right.
is to other pets.
Right.
Typically, the coyote with that disease may die off itself, but it may take as long as 2 years, according to DNR. And their immune system is depleted, so they could act more aggressively, but it would be hunting for food, and that's where the smaller animals would come in that would maybe be a little bit more at risk. I don't have an answer as to their health because I didn't ask them just exactly what the health of the animal was, the coyote, except for that DNR said that their immune system is depleted with the psychotic mange.
So again, the reason for targeting these ill animals is because they're more likely to go after pets?
And they're more likely to act a little bit irrational because
Okay.
they have to hunt, according to DNR, they need to hunt harder and more
Because
and
they're
go
more-
in further than they would if they didn't have the mange.
Because they're more lethargic, they have less,
Correct.
yeah, that's my understanding. I just wanted to be clear about that they weren't necessarily posing any additional risk to residents.
No, they made it clear to me that the psychotic mange, as far as transmission of disease, cannot go to humans.
Right, or that they're not, yeah.
Yes.
They don't attack more because they're ill, that sort of thing.
Trustees? Anyone from the public like to address this? Well, I guess then I'll talk, since nobody else wants to. I have to say, I've thought a lot about this since the last meeting. And going into the last meeting, I was leaning more toward the thought that with regard to sick and diseased animals, that this might be an appropriate thing to do. But having done more research on it, and I have to say also after reading some of the comments that Mr. Erickson made in the last landmark, where he derided the idea of hazing, which is uniformly considered to be the appropriate way of trying to handle urban coyotes, then I'm very concerned about this. I am concerned that we have a situation, you know, there's an old saying that if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I still have not heard, and to my understanding, Mr. Erickson has not been forthcoming in really sharing with us the protocol of how he would either, one, identify an animal as ill, how he would identify a particular animal as the one that had been cited prior. And with regard to Trustee Sussman's comments, from my reading, there has been no correlation between sarcoptic mange and any kind of increased danger to either humans or to pets. I haven't, if there's something out there that says that.
Well,
I
that
haven't seen
information,
it.
just a clarification, that information came from the Department of Natural Resources. They're the ones that told us that the sarcoptic mange is can be harmful to other animals.
Well, that's a different thing.
Yeah.
I mean, if they're saying that sarcoptic mange can be transferred from a coyote to dogs, that's true, but it's through contact.
Yes, that's correct.
And the infective time for the mite that causes it is 36 hours. So absent direct contact with the coyote, it's unlikely that the mange could be transferred. Also, my understanding is that it does not get transferred to cats.
That's my understanding also.
It's a canine, incident. So my opinion is that we still, I have received a number, I mean, perhaps you haven't heard about this, I have. I've received a number of calls and emails about people feeding wildlife, which is...
I actually have had phone calls that residents are either leaving dog food or garbage out, or in some cases purposefully leaving food out for a coyote.
And that really is the issue. The problem that we're having with coyotes in this village is because people are feeding the coyotes. They are coming here because of a stable food source. And the reason they're getting acclimated to humans is because we're allowing them to get acclimated to humans. We spend a lot of time talking about how we need to learn how to live with urban wildlife, but I think the other component here is we have to insist that urban wildlife learns how to live with us. And the standard for that is hazing when it comes to urban coyotes. So I would support, before we got to such an extreme circumstance that's starting to shoot animals, which really just leaves a hole that another coyote comes into. So there's no evidence that I've read that absent widespread culling of a coyote population, that this is going to have any impact whatsoever on the number of coyotes in Riverside. So I would advocate, before we do that, reaching out perhaps to the Humane Society, having a much more stringent effort in terms of public education with regard to feeding, hazing, and how to properly live with these animals. I think at this point, the case has not been made to start shooting animals within our village limits. That's my perspective.
I agree with what you're saying, Ben. I just don't think that we're at a point where I'm comfortable with shooting animals within the village. And I think that part of it is that they are very comfortable, and you see the coyotes just walking down the sidewalk as though they belong here. And I think maybe we need to have more of a hazing. I think most of us leave them alone, and maybe we need to come up with some methods of hazing that would be appropriate, that would not put anybody in danger. But maybe if we could come up with a hazing policy that actually tells people what they should do as far as what does hazing mean, so that when it is just walking down the street, that people take the appropriate action.
And I wonder, too, from a governmental standpoint, I mean, right now, our ordinance against feeding wild animals carries a $35 fine. I really am concerned that people are not being sensitive to how much damage they're doing, not only to residents, but to the coyotes by feeding them. I mean, there's a saying I read the other day, a fed coyote is a dead coyote. Because all you're doing is one, you're acclimating them to human food, you're curtailing their natural impulses and their abilities to hunt, and you're drawing them into situations where they're going to be in more direct contact with humans, which is where the danger to them. So I would say, we should look at possibly doing something with regard to strengthening that ordinance, and then having a much stronger public education campaign with regard to hazing. Because Mr. Erickson's comments notwithstanding, it is uniformly agreed that hazing is the proper solution to urban coyotes. Ms. Payne, did you want to say something?
Jackie Payne, 189 Woodside Road. I have done some research on this, and from my research, the coyotes that are coming into urban areas are usually males seeking new territories because they're a territorial animal. And they're opportunistic feeders, which means, like almost everybody or every animal, they will look for the easy pickings, okay? So these areas Riverside is obviously easy because they don't have any natural predators here. Also, it said as far as discouraging them, loud noises can do this, bright lights and stuff like that. But I agree with you that leaving food out for these animals is really not a good idea. The other thing I want to comment on is that if, as our chief says, by the time his officers get to these homes where they've reported sightings and the animals are no longer there, I'm not clear how Mr. Erickson would be able to find them. I'm sure he's very skilled in this, but it seems to me he could spend a lot of time chasing around without finding any animal to shoot or tase or whatever. The last thing is that, the other method would be trapping, but obviously setting snare traps, but obviously that would be a very poor idea here because pets can get caught in the traps or other animals. So, that would be really, really silly because you could get people's dogs might get caught in the traps and stuff, and then I think we really would have a problem in the village. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
And if I can just add one factual piece here from the chief's memo, is with regard to cost. The cost for the trapping is $3,500 just to set up the traps, $250 per coyote trapped and removed, and if shooting became the option, it's $1,000 per animal.
I would just like to make sure that we clarify that we're specifically talking about ill animals. There are two issues here. One issue is the coyotes that have the mange. The other one is what do we do about being better urban dwellers and learning to manage the coyote population. And what we're dealing with right now are these few animals, the 3 out of the whatever sightings, that are in pain, that are sick, and that are making people quite apprehensive. I think that's specifically what's before us right now. And then the second question is, over the longer term, what do we do to make sure that residents realize they shouldn't be leaving out food, that there is an appropriate, perhaps a better hazing policy. But I'd like us to focus on this issue of the animals that are truly in pain or in some discomfort, that may be coming closer into homes to look for easy, to use the chief's word, easy pickings. Was that your word? Sorry. I'll blame it on you, even if it wasn't.
That was Ms.
Jackie, that was your word. And if those should be managed differently than the general coyote population, I would venture to say that nobody in this board thinks we should be trapping or shooting any coyote that comes into town. And to your credit, you're talking about a specific, very small subset of coyotes that are coming into town. And I think we should focus on that first and then turn to the larger issue.
Other comment?
And I mean, because what we're saying is that we're going to, sorry, Don, what we're saying is by not doing anything, we're going to allow these animals who are clearly ill. I think it's a different issue to Jackie's point about whether we can actually find them a second time after they've been reported. But, we are talking about a subset of animals that are very ill and that are making people uncomfortable and potentially are perhaps coming more into yards than the other kind of coyote, a healthy coyote.
Don, did you want to comment? Please.
I got crossed up by the clock. I thought you guys started at 7:30. Did you change the time of the hours?
Yeah,
In
7
May.
o'clock.
Well, see, I've been away, and there you go. Donald Spatney, 111 Woodside. Well, on the subject of populations, I'm out every night with my dog. I see red fox, possums, every night, raccoons, deer. People go ape shit over, some deer eating their flowers, and they want to go and do that. We did this once with the coyote trapper when Kevin Smith's dog was barked at or something by a coyote, and we had some guy down at the big ballpark with a trap, and all he got was red foxes. Does anybody remember that? It's a couple of years back. You're not going to catch these things there. You got the deer and all the animals come across the swinging bridge at night. I see them. I'm out here every night with my dog. The Swan Pond is a menagerie. It's really wonderful. We're 9 miles from the Sears Tower, and you've got all these wonderful animals there, including the beaver and the river and the muskrats and possums and so forth. So, and then I'm a deer feeder, not in Riverside. I feed the deer at 47th and Harlem. They're trapped in the forest preserve. And somebody like the county or, they hire off-duty cops to come and shoot them, cull them. Now, firing guns around, in forest preserves and villages, and I think we had a guy here once that wanted to come and shoot them with bows and arrows, some kind of deer in town. I mean, are we crazy? Is this really necessary? A couple of coyote running down the street. I see them up on Selborne Road. There's 2, 3 running at a time, and they're just going somewhere. They were here first. We borrowed this place from all the animals. And everybody that wants to go and just, I believe it was Kevin Smith said he chained his dog up in his backyard. I think that's what he said. Well, who chains up a dog in a yard, right? A coyote came around, he was scared, he had a small dog. Somebody else, I have a coyote that comes through my driveway at night. He goes down to the river. I see him occasionally. I think we go crazy here. And I have to amend something to this. I came to offer to buy willow trees for the river, and I see I missed it by a half hour. But I would just like you guys to think about it. I will give 10 willow trees to the river, starting to plant from behind the library all the way around on the riverbank. Go out west, look at what they do around retention ponds. Willows are very nice, native species. Probably the biggest tree in Riverside is a willow that's behind the tennis courts. And they grow fast, they're easy to plant. We should plant them in December and January. If you guys will go ahead and say, okay, I will get them in a FedEx to the department. We get some kids from the ecology club at the high school, just like we did a few years ago with all those trees in the Swan Pond, and we'd go out and plant these. And, it'll just look like a little skinny stick, 6 feet high, right? Just like the Army Corps planted in the Swan Pond, those same size trees. And in 5 years, we'll have some nice willows along the riverbank, and it'll look really good. So I would hope that you would take me up on this, right? I'll put up $500, okay?
That's very gracious.
And I wanted to tell you that Exelon gave $10,000 to the village, to the city of Chicago to plant trees on a matching basis, $100 for $100. And why don't we approach some of these companies and see, maybe for Exelon, I mean, they sell us our power after all, maybe that would be a really good deal to help restore the trees that we're decimating here through ash borers in a national landmark village. And some big company, put up 10 grand, and then we get people in town chip in $100, match $100. For $200, you could get 4 willow trees. You can get, we don't need to buy these $250 trees everywhere. We can go down to, they have very nice trees at places around. I look on the internet and I see all the time, 40, 50, 60 bucks. You can get a nice swamp oak, you can get other trees. We don't need to play this game with these, fantastic guys that go out and hunt seeds in the night and all that, right?
Well, thank you for that offer, and I would ask you, speak to Mr. Scalera. He can put you in touch with the forester and.
Yeah,
Public
well, I
Works.
already said I sort of left a message over with Ed because
That's
Mike
very nice.
wasn't there. But that would be good to plant some willows along there. Anybody goes down to Lincoln Park, you see all the willows along the water, or out here west, go out 31st Street, all those retention ponds out there. You know, they look really nice.
But now back to coyotes.
Pardon?
Now back to coyotes.
Oh, yeah, but go back to coyotes. Let's not go, you know, crazy about shooting coyotes and stuff in town, you know. I mean,
Okay, thank you very much.
the animals were here first, right?
Anyone else like to address this?
Pardon?
So in Indians, we freed the Negro, but we didn't free the Indian.
Well, that's right, we paid the Indian.
Well, I guess I would like to know what people
Gentlemen.
think we should do with the sick animals.
Um,
That is something, whether from the people who are visiting tonight or my fellow trustees, because it is really that subset that we're talking about right now.
Ms. Hamilton?
If a coyote is clearly infected with the mange, and I mean, you know, all over its body, I am in favor of putting it down.
Mr. Powell?
Well, I agree that we need more public education, that hazing appears to be the answer. I would like to see us be much more aggressive in educating people. You know, maybe a video on the website, things like that, but just really, you know, making sure people have the opportunity to understand the effectiveness of it and help them overcome the fear of doing it. I would imagine the biggest reason people don't do it is they see a coyote, they want to get away. And they don't want to, you know, they're afraid if they haze it, the coyote's going to respond aggressively. So we need to educate people about that. I can certainly see the need or the benefit to authorize our police department to dispose of a dangerous animal. But what I'd asked for at the last meeting, and I really didn't hear tonight, is how do they do it? You know, step by step. You know, a resident calls and says, there's this terrible coyote in my backyard. So the police call this trapper. How quickly is he there? Where does he go? What does he do? How does he identify that particular animal?
I might be able to clarify some of that by saying that if he wouldn't respond like that from my conversations with him, is we'd have to develop a pattern of the main psychotic main coyote. So we'd have to get the sightings. We'd have to develop a pattern. He'd have to come here and meet with us. We'd have to go over that pattern. Say, for example, that residents have reported a coyote with no hair, which is one of the symptoms that we've had they've all been reported within the 3-block area within the last 10 to 15 days. We'd have to plot that out for him and get him that data, and then he would have to go in that area and take our data and actually, if it was a snare trap, he'd set one up. I don't necessarily support that, like one of our residents just spoke to a few minutes ago. And he doesn't either. That's why it's so much more expensive, is because there's much more liability with that, at least in his opinion. But that data, then he would come out and he'd have to actually spend time here looking for that coyote, the one that has no hair, based on the patterns in the reports, either from my officers or residents. So it wouldn't be something like a resident calls us at 8 o'clock tonight and says, there's a coyote in my backyard that doesn't have any hair. We don't call him at his business and tell him we spotted one at 123 Riverside Road. You drive out here, because his business is an hour from the village of Riverside. The coyote won't be there when he arrives. So there'd be much groundwork that would have to be done. It wouldn't be something where he would immediately be responding to one of our calls. It would be a plan that we would have to set up with him, and he'd have to come out and execute that plan if possible over a period of weeks.
And he would still have to do this within the residential area, I assume.
Yeah, that's one of the issues, that almost all these reports are within the residential areas. Yeah. We've had some by the river and stuff, but that's normal. That's where the coyotes, they're supposed to be, by the river and the forest preserve. But we're specifically talking about residential neighborhoods that we're receiving the calls on.
And so my problem is, I don't want him shooting a coyote in my front yard, okay? And that's where we're going to be, is this is going to be in someone's yard. And how, theoretically, I agree with you that if there's a sick animal, it should be put down. And if I had a dog that was sick, I would do that and take it to the vet. But this is not that. This is a wild animal that has a condition that he may or may not die from. Basically, it's hair loss, and it's affecting their immune system. And in my opinion, you let nature take its course. I mean, animals do die in the wild. That's just what nature is. And if I could take it into the vet and have it given a shot and put down, I would do that. But I don't want someone with a rifle in my front yard shooting it. So that's where I see the distinction. And I personally, unless this animal becomes really dangerous, and we don't even have anecdotal stories at this point of danger from these coyotes.
That's why I asked.
And so I just don't feel that we're at the point where I am comfortable with someone shooting an animal in town. That's personal.
And just to follow up on that, and Trustee Sussman, to address your point, I mean, I think what Trustee Collins just said is really on point. One, the premise that there are sick animals that are suffering and need to be put down is anecdotal at best. We have no evidence of that. We have no evidence at what point, given this particular condition, an animal is in danger or in pain. We don't know that, and I'm reluctant for us living in an urban forest to start to try to manage all forms of wildlife because we are projecting upon them some perceived suffering. We don't know that.
Right. I would, like, if a coyote was hit by a car, yes, would I want it to be put down because it was suffering? Absolutely. But then we know what it is, what the situation is. So I see that as different. I just see this as crossing a line and making a determination. From a human standpoint, they are ugly looking. So that's what people are afraid of, because they look ugly when they don't have the hair. But that's our perception, and they may or may not be suffering. We don't know that.
I would just like to interject, because I've seen animals with mange. They are completely uncomfortable. Their skin's on fire. They're scratching all the time. They are completely uncomfortable. So to say that they're not uncomfortable is untrue.
Oh, I'm not saying they're not uncomfortable.
I respect what you're saying, but they're
No, I'm not saying they're not
They're
uncomfortable.
definitely in pain.
Right, I'm not saying that they're not,
Yes.
but I'm just saying I don't want us to start making that determination, because I think you cross a line at that point. So.
And I just think that there is so much more that can be done prior to this extreme step of starting to trap and shoot animals within our village limits. It is quite clear to me that the public education process has not been successful at this point. I hear numerous accounts of people talking about trying to run coyotes off, and they'll shoo it, it'll go 100 feet, turn around and look at them, and then they'll stop, which is the basic problem, that you have to run the animal out of the area. So until we can teach our residents and ourselves how to live with these animals and how to condition these animals so that they stay away from us, I think to resort to shooting is our failure. It's our failure, because we have not done the work necessary to try to manage these animals in the way that in the academic literature is uniformly accepted, which is hazing. So with that.
I think it's like, why is the raccoon problem up? People leave their garbage cans open, people leave food outside. I'm in agreement with President Sells. If we could increase the fine for people that are actively feeding wild animals, I'd be in favor of that.
So with regard to this initiative, with regard to authorizing the police to, whether it's Mr. Erickson or someone else, to, at this point, use trapping or shooting, where are we at, Mr. Foley?
I think trapping in the past, we weren't too successful with it. I think if the animal is injured, visibly, open sores, foaming at the mouth, I think the animal should be removed sooner than later. I do agree to allow nature to take its course 9 times out of 10, but if there is an animal in someone's yard and it is visibly in distress, acting erratically, and causing the homeowner to feel concerned, I think they should notify the police. I think we should be able to somehow remove the animal. What method we use, I'm not sure. I'm not comfortable with people unloading weapons in other people's yards. But, you know, if the animal can be brought close, either by the officer or by an outside source and removed, I'd be in favor of that.
Ms. Collins?
I'm not in favor of shooting at this time.
Mr. Potter?
I would definitely like to see us implement a very aggressive education policy before we were to do anything else. And it does sound like the police have the authority right now. If an animal is posing an immediate danger to somebody, they have the authority to take care of that, correct?
If the officer sees that
the
action,
officer sees that happen.
it's an on view
Right.
by the officer there.
And certainly there's the potential of, you know, something, of having an animal right there that's in distress. It hasn't happened yet, though, and I wouldn't want to give a carte blanche approval to, you know, to shoot or call and shoot animals. So I think I would agree more with Trustee Collins that at this point, let's just try to be more aggressive with education and stick with stick with that.
Ms. Haynes?
Well, as Trustee Sussman said earlier, I think we're clearly talking about numerous issues, and that is confusing what our decision is. So clearly, we need to have more education on this. But I think there's a big difference between having a hazing policy, having a no-feeding policy, which I'm absolutely in favor of, and seeing an animal that's clearly in distress and being able to put it out of its misery, which is what I was saying. Under those circumstances, I advocate that. And if that requires discharging a weapon, I believe that that's allowable.
I agree with Ellen.
I would like to point out to the board and to the public that the village does have a coyote policy in place, and the policy does include a step-by-step process that walks people through what steps they would need to take in order to do the hazing. It is something that when we receive calls, we share that information with the homeowners. So we do have a policy which the individual from the Wildlife Humane Society has indicated is a very good policy. It is posted on the village website. We probably haven't been effective in getting the message out that we do have a policy in place, but it is something that we have the basis for it, which we can build upon.
What about President Sell's suggestion that we look at the fine structure as well for feeding animals,
I noticed
wild
that
animals?
Wheaton's fines are substantially greater than ours.
Right, and Wheaton went the other route where they did utilize Mr. Erickson's services to remove certain coyotes. I do feel that the fine is too low and does need to be increased.
So could we ask staff to come back with that?
We can put that on the agenda for discussion next time.
Or to ask staff to come back with a recommendation?
And I guess just so that I could add my 2 cents, I do understand that hazing is the proven method to kind of distinguish a coyote from the urban setting. However, I think this staff's decision to bring this before the board was a direct result of a number of calls that we have received from residents who are concerned, and a lot of them, to Trustee Pollack's point, don't want to take the steps to do the hazing because they're fearful that the coyote will turn around and react. And even though there are a number of documents or studies that show that they probably won't, it's hard to tell someone you have to stay there and follow this policy and do the hazing And so that is the main reason why I believe we brought this recommendation back to the board, because it is a lot of the calls or concerns have to deal with the coyotes that have the mange. But I do believe, as President Sells indicated, a stronger educational effort is needed, and we actually have been in touch with Lindsay Dwyer from the Humane Society, and we will work with her to coordinate a workshop or a public town meeting where we can bring her here and provide a educational forum for the community.
So then I think that the consensus is at this point that will be the way we go. And certainly, Chief, I know that one of the reasons you're here talking about this is that you get all the calls and it's put your officers in a difficult situation. You know, if down the line this needs to be revisited, we're certainly willing to do that.
I would like the board to know that we do carry that policy in our squad cars, and when residents do call, if they want to see the police, because there are residents that call us that don't want the police officer to make contact with them, they just want us to check the area for the animal. But if they want to speak to the police, that policy is handed out to our residents, so they have it.
And maybe if we could put that back, I know for a while we had that front and center on our website. We should do that because it really is an excellent policy, and I would encourage everyone to take a look at it.
I can't remember, did it go out in the water bill already?
It's a pretty large document. We did, I think in the water bills, didn't we include like the fact sheet on how to do the hazing?
I think we deferred it until the February-March issue because that's the spring mating season, and we're probably going to have more sightings then.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, trustees. Okay, moving on next, under ordinances and resolutions, is an ordinance amending various sections of Village of Riverside zoning ordinance and village code relative to variation fees, process, and procedures. Mr. Mars or Mr. Scarlera, or one of you going to lead us through this?
Thank you, Mr. President. The board may remember you've discussed the variation process and procedures several times. Most recently in September, when you had before you a memo prepared by Trustee Pollack, who had worked with Trustee Ballerine to come up with some recommendations relative to the variation process. At that time, there was a consensus of the board to send the proposed changes to the Plan Commission for a public hearing. That public hearing was held in November, and those materials are in your packet, including a transcript. The first couple changes concern notice, changing from the certified mail to a first-class mail, and we're keeping hand delivery in there as an alternative in the event that you want to do that in a particular case, but first-class mail is going to be your primary option. And in addition, we've added something new, which is posting a sign on the property to provide additional notice to people that there's a variation pending. It's got to be up at least 15 days prior to the hearing. And it's, so I'd say at the Plan Commission discussion, those two particular aspects were talked about, and there was general agreement that those were good changes. And then we had a couple of additional changes, and those were the fees, the fee structure for variations, both residential and commercial. Trustee Pollack's memo had suggested lowering the fee for residential variations from $1,000 down to $500. And the Plan Commission, after some significant discussion, said they were fine with the $500, but they recommended that in addition, the resident be responsible for the cost of publication in the newspaper, as well as the costs that the village was out of pocket for the mailing. And so the ordinance in your packet today reflects those recommendations. And lastly, for commercial variations, the fee was $3,000. Again, there was quite a bit of discussion as to how best to go about this. The original recommendation had been to create an escrow or retainer for commercial businesses asking for a variation, so that we're making sure that we're recovering all of our direct costs. So the recommendation ultimately made by the Plan Commission was for a base fee of $1,000, plus an additional retainer amount set on a case-by-case basis, and an amount deemed to be sufficient to recover the village's direct costs, and a lot of those costs are detailed in the ordinance. And the board would have the ability in particular cases for charitable organizations or in other cases of a hardship or for other public bodies to either waive, reduce, or cap that fee. And so those are the recommendations before you. You have findings of fact, you have a transcript, and you have a draft ordinance.
Okay, so first I would ask for a motion and a second to approve an ordinance amending various sections of the Village of Riverside zoning ordinance and village code relative to variation fees, process, and procedure.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Hamilton, second by Mr. Foley. Discussion. Ms. Sussman.
I have a couple of questions. On page 2 of the document, of the ordinance itself,
Yes.
section 3D2, where we'll give notice to which people?
Yes.
What about tenants, Mike? If it's only tax collectors' records? We're talking about an apartment building or somebody who lives next door to an apartment building. How would all the tenants be notified?
You know, I don't know, Bob, is it your practice to notify the tenants as well? I mean, you're not legally required to. The statute provides just for the people who pay the
owners.
taxes.
Okay.
And I think the idea behind that is that the owners are the one who really have a vested interest in what's going on in the neighboring property, whereas the tenants are more transient.
All right. It's not always the case, of course.
No, I
but-
know. But I think that's probably the theory behind it.
But also posting the sign viewed as a really good idea.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea to post signs. I know many communities already do that. I had a question about the retainers. And I know that there is a lot of legal language that goes along with this, but is the retainer paid at the same time that the application is made?
Yeah, the thought would be that when an application comes in, that Peter and Bob or other members of staff as appropriate would sort of make a best guess of whether this is going to be something that's going to be controversial or something that's going to be complicated and is going to cause the village to incur additional legal fees or engineering fees, consultant type fees. And that way they could set what they thought would be a good starting point for a retainer. If it was something where you didn't ask for a retainer initially, but it turns out it was evolving into something that had some of those aspects to it, then you could ask for it as you went along.
And that's why you have the language, all the legal language about who owes and when. And, yeah, okay. And then for the on page 4, which is commercial variations, my understanding is that for a residential variation, you're just covering the cost of notification, right?
Correct.
And the mailing, that's what I mean. Yeah, thanks, Bob. But none of these other costs, Bob, would ever pertain or would be germane to a residence, page 4? The ones that are listed here for commercial? Aren't some of those also pertinent, or? I'll let you talk.
Court reporter, that will still be up in the air once it's determined how minutes are going to be taken as we move forward. There'll be a cost either way, whether it's a court reporter or someone will have to transcribe the recording, or however that works out. There'll either be staff time or vendor time involved to some degree with court reporting. The base fee pretty much tries to take up my time, secretarial time, to get the basic information out, to get the things to the paper, to get the mailings created and distributed. Document preparation. There's also the move toward making the applicant prepare a tighter package when they come in. So that will lessen staff time and also bring under the number of reductions or copy and reproductions down by having the applicant carry the bulk of that requirement. There's always going to be legal review. Professional and technical consultant services, we could ask for estimates, be it plan reviewers, engineering, legal, I'm sure can also provide us with what they may have involved with it. We can do a percentage of that bid and ask for that amount, or we can go for actual cost, however you determine that.
I understand that. This list, however, pertains only to commercial.
Right.
And so my question is, these costs also exist for residential applications, for many residential
Right,
applications.
but a lot of the discussion at the
we're
board.
not.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, yet we're not going to transfer those costs to the residents, to the applicants, right?
Right. Yeah, because a lot of the discussion at the board
Is that-
level is centered around trying to
Yeah.
lower the cost for residential variations to make the process accessible. If you remember the fence variation that
Yeah, no, I remember
everyone
the
talked
fence
about, and
variation.
that sort of triggered this whole discussion of what is $1,000 too high to make somebody come in when all they're trying to do is something.
Right, but more and more frequently, for instance, in our code now, we require, for instance, an engineer with experience in water to come in and look at residential additions or new buildings. We
Typically,
frequently
that
ask
portion of
that.
the residential doesn't come till the permit processing, and that would fall back to our
Oh,
site
okay.
grading criteria. We haven't, that I can recall, have anybody come in for, well, first, it's not in the zoning code.
Oh,
Drainage.
it's in the building code.
It's in the
yeah.
building side of the code, so that wouldn't apply as far as
Right.
site grading, and that would be hard cost at the point of permitting, should they obtain the necessary variation to go forward with their project or modify their project to go forward.
So I know I was not here for this initial discussion, so the majority of the board then agreed that any of these additional costs should be costs that the village absorbs.
The discussion of the commercial was not as detailed as this.
No,
It
the
was more just that
residential.
we
I mean the
want-
residential, any of these, because some of these will still pertain to residential.
Yeah, there was a general understanding that the cost of a residential variation would likely to exceed the $500.
And that was okay?
Yes.
Because it will exceed the 500. It'll,
Yes.
yeah, it will always exceed the 500.
And the
Typically-
Plan Commission was somewhat concerned about that, which is why they added those additional costs above that, the publication and the mailing.
Right, that's,
Into account the number of variations that have been looked at.
right, I understand that. Okay, I just wanted to clarify. That's it for me for this part.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes, I am in support of the ordinance as recommended by the Plan Commission, but with a couple of exceptions. Primarily, the add-on that they are recommending that the fee for residential variation be $500 plus the cost of publication and notices. Those costs are going to be probably another $200, $300. So we're effectively not reducing the fee by much if we include that. I would rather just have it a flat $500. I would be comfortable with something less than that, but I think $500 is what the board and the Plan Commission has talked about previously. Also, and this is more of a secondary concern, I can assure you that everyone who files a residential variation is going to want staff to hand deliver the notices so that if this were included, because that's free in theory, and so, it puts some pressure on staff to hand deliver the notices instead of by first-class mail. It's not a big factor, but I just mentioned that. But I would like to see the motion amended to delete that section of the ordinance. Second, the reference in, I guess, section 4, paragraph 4,
What page is that?
page 5, number 4, regarding hardship. I would rather leave the hardship discussion out of the ordinance altogether. I believe that someone could come and ask for a reduction in the fee with or without that in the ordinance. And I think putting it in the ordinance just, I just see it as a potential problem, because what is the hardship? I mean, what is our criteria for reducing or waiving the fee? And without some kind of guidance, and then I think we're over legislating if we try to put guidance in there. I'd rather just leave it out of there. And if someone really wants, to request a fee waiver, we can consider it, but without any reference to that in the ordinance. And that's all I have. Like I said, I think this is a good change to our policies and our ordinances, and that should be approved.
So let's deal with that first. So would you like to make a motion to strike the plus cost of publication and notice in section 4J?
Yes, and to
So let's-
strike it. Or
let's
should
go
get
one
it
at a time.
one
Yes.
at a time? Okay, sure.
So can these be separate motions, or should these be treated as amendments to the over?
I think you could do it a variety of ways. Like Trustee Pollack could make an amended motion to adopt the ordinance with those two changes and see if it's seconded, or you could have an informal discussion trying to achieve a consensus on how everyone else feels about those, get it all buttoned up pretty much, and then make a final.
Well, why don't we do that then? Let's first deal with section 4J, the issue of whether for a residential variation, the $500 should include plus cost publication and notice. What is your feeling?
I agree with Trustee Pollack. That was my same opinion, was that when you're adding that on, we're basically back up to the figure that we were at before. We're just saying it in a different way. So if the intention was truly to lower the fee, then I think that we need to strike the additional cost.
I guess I don't understand why mailing and publication adds up to $500. I don't
What
think
was
it
the-
does.
Mike, what was the publication?
It's typically around 300.
It's
Oh, it
typically,
is.
for publication, anywhere from 375 to 400, depending on the amount of space, how tall it is. So if you have a long legal description, you're going to pay a little more for your space. Mailings, it just depends on how many addresses are within the three.
So it
By
doesn't-
code, it's 250.
It's almost back to
We usually
1,000.
go outside to make sure we get everybody. So there could be 30, 40 mailings, there could be 120 mailings. That's why the certified mailing was so prohibited.
Tim?
I'm fine with it being flat at 500. I think when we discussed this the first time.
Okay,
Yeah,
now-
I'm fine with it then, too.
So then moving to section 4K4,
I'm
the
fine with
waiver.
removing that.
You're fine with removing?
I'm okay with it.
Removing?
I agree, anyone can come to the village and ask for a waiver anytime they want.
Okay, so I'd ask for a motion and a second to amend the motion to delete those two sections.
I guess I would suggest somebody make a motion to adopt the ordinance as now modified by eliminating costs of publication and notice for residential in section 4, the J dealing with zoning fees, and eliminating section 4 of K on page 5 of the draft ordinance dealing with waiver for specified public bodies or hardship, deleting that entire section, which would then renumber 5 and 6 as 4 and 5.
I'm prepared to make that motion, but we have a motion on the table right
Oh,
now.
how about just a friendly emotion,
It could be, yeah.
friendly
A
amendment?
friendly amendment would be fine. I mean, there are only 7 of us,
Yeah,
I'll second
and we all agree.
And we're all friendly. So, all right, so we're all.
I'll second his friendly
Okay.
amendment.
Yes. So let's vote on the amendment, just to make it clear.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
So the amendment carries, and now we'll go back to the standing motion to adopt the ordinance as drafted with those changes. Any further discussion? Right? Okay, you may call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollack.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Motion carries. And may I say too, Mr. Pollack, I'm glad you're here, and I wish Trustee Ballerine was. This was really excellent work, and also with regard to our staff and the legal work that was put into this, and with the Plan Commission. Really nicely done. Okay, moving on. That's all of the ordinances and resolutions we have. Next up is a discussion that is stemming from our earlier decision to combine the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Procedurally, the way this is going to work is we're just going to have an informal discussion about these changes tonight. There has been a public hearing noticed by the Plan Commission for December 17th. at which they will consider the various changes that are before us tonight. And they will report back to us in time for our meeting on December 19th, when we will then decide whether we want to go ahead and move forward with approving the changes at that point, or we want further discussion. Now, many of the, and this has been a process, a pretty extensive process between Mr. Scalera and Mr. Mars and Mr. Pollack and myself. So you have a lot of changes in front of you. Many of them, however, fall into the realm of basically just making things match up. Once we have changed the terminology to, instead of a plan commission and a zoning board of appeals, to have a planning and zoning commission. But I would like to draw specific attention to some of the changes. First, on pages 1 through 3, chapter 15, that really is the heart of the change that establishes the new planning and zoning commission. Now, when both with regard to CMAP and the Plan Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals, they also, when they gave us their commission reports concerning how to start to streamline the review process, they also suggested a number of substantive changes that went to the actual authority that currently exists, both with regard to plan, zoning, and also with regard to Landscape Advisory Commission and the Preservation Commission. So those changes exist primarily with regard to the site review plan, which is are on pages 3 through 10 of the materials you have. And then, and let me just read those so that everyone who doesn't happen to have this in front of them can know what we're talking about. One change with regard to the site plan review will make a pre-application meeting, which is currently optional. It would make the pre-application meeting mandatory. And then a concept plan review, which is currently mandatory, it would make it optional. And if we want to have more discussion about that, I think that Trustee Pollack can certainly speak to that issue. Another section eliminates separate reviews, and again, this is with regard to the site plan review. Eliminates the current separate reviews that are required by the Preservation Commission and the Landscape Advisory Commission. Now, it's important to note that under the new format, these and other commissions would still be invited and be welcome to speak and give their opinions with regard to anything having to do with the site plan. What the proposed changes eliminate are the need for multiple required formal meetings, which was the heart of the CMAP proposal to try to start to streamline the review process. And also of note, the Preservation Commission, although technically removed from the site plan review, would still retain its authority over landmark buildings that within the business districts because of the authority granted to them under Title 11.
Where does it say that? I was looking for that specifically. Could you point that out, please?
You'd think I had memorized this by now. It's under, you don't have, do you have the code in front of you? It's 11-131.
I know I have
Under
only
the Preservation Commission, under D.
Under D, on your change?
Under duties.
But in the draft one that we're proposing.
Oh, in the draft.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
Sorry, Ben. I see where it's taken out. I couldn't find where it was put back in.
No, it's not put back in. No.
So they don't have advisory?
No, they do. They have separate review authority because of Title 11.
So it doesn't need to be mentioned?
Which is why it doesn't need to be mentioned.
Oh, because they have, because
they
it's
have
a state law.
Well, it's our law.
It's our law, but it's also a, okay.
Right, yeah, so it's already in Title 11.
Okay, all right, got it.
And this would also, another change to the site plan review would be to allow the zoning administrator, who in our village is our village manager, to review and approve minor changes to the site plan without having to go through. It's kind of curious, the way it's currently in our code really has problems with regard to the Open Meetings Act because of the way it anticipates having a committee, a smaller committee hearing with regard to minor changes. So it was the attorney's opinion that the best way to handle that would be with regard to the zoning administrator. And then with regard to the additional proposed text amendments that are on pages 11 through 32. There are a number in here. One with regard to Section 214 would allow the village president to remove the chair of a commission, board, or committee and to reappoint a new chair with the advice and consent of the village board. Another one would allow the director of public works to approve parkway plantings without advisory review. Another would allow the director of public works to approve hardscape within the business districts, notably within the business districts only, without advisory review or review and approval by the village board. For hardscape outside of the business districts, we would retain the current process, where it would be a review by both preservation, LAC, and then ultimately come to the village board for approval. Another section allows for plants in addition to the preferred plant list to be planted within the business districts, and to allow the director of public works to approve landscaping within the business districts without advisory review, and other plantings within the business districts. So you get the general thrust of this is to try, and in keeping with the CMAP recommendation, to try to consolidate authority over the business districts with the newly constituted Planning and Zoning Commission, and also to release some of the review burden on LAC and preservation with regard to matters that can best be handled by staff, with our Director of Public Works and our village forester. So that's the overview, and I'll open it up for discussion, suggestions of any changes that you might want to consider.
I think this is really going to streamline the whole process of not having to wait for the two different groups to get together. I'm behind this.
I have some general questions.
Please.
I guess I'll start with the proposed text. I just have a question for you, Ben. I understand that the chair can only serve of a commission. I'm sorry, I'm on 2-15-1.
Okay.
That a chair can only serve for 2 terms. In here, are we just assuming that a commissioner can keep being reappointed?
Yes.
Okay, because it doesn't say anything about it one way or another, so the person can be reappointed.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and to follow up on that, a chair could serve 2 terms as chair
Sure,
and still
right.
be on the commission after that, correct? Correct.
Okay, I had a couple of other questions. I see how it's been reorganized. I like the way it's reorganized, where the signs are put in one area, that kind of thing. I did have a couple of questions. Oh, I do have a question about, I agree with, this is about the concept plan review and not requiring that the other commissions meet in order to expedite the whole process. But there's nothing in here that formally says the other commissions need to be notified of the meeting or need to be sent a copy of the review. And I think that if we're saying you have the opportunity to comment on it, then I think we should have in here that the village manager or the head of the buildings department should formally contact the other commissions with the relevant information and make sure they know what's going on so that they can choose to come or comment, rather than just assume they're going to know about it. And that would be, I was thinking about that then with respect to page 5, number 2. But I just think it's a good idea to not forget that these other commissions that aren't required to meet should get the information.
Comments?
This is something I mentioned to Michael, I don't know. You answered some of my other ones. I think I have just a couple of small, there's just a typo on page 11. Under the list of boards, commissions, and committees created, the last one still says Zoning Board of Appeals. I think you want to take that off.
That is left in
For legal?
because we reserved that line later on. I think that was the...
Right, so there's a section that says the Zoning Board of Appeals is the members of the Plan Commission.
I wondered, I saw that later on. So that's why you're leaving it there, because it's
that's
still
why
the function of a zoning board.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, from a statutory perspective.
Yeah, is that why?
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Let me just double check. I do have a question. I agree. I'm now on the hardscape in public areas, so this is page 18. Let me see if planting work is to be done on the parkway. No, maybe I don't. I think you've answered many of these. Oh, I do have a question. I'm sorry. On page 18, under 8-13-1, number 2, D2, D2, it goes from A to D. Well,
Oh,
whatever.
that's because-
That's fine. Whatever. It's just number 2.
Because there were no changes.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It says that the Director of Public Works will solicit advisory comments for B1 and B2 for hardscape. What if the hardscape work outside the business together? Okay, so then number 3 deals with the other, for instance, triangles or some of the other common spaces. Okay.
Right. Yes, for...
Then the trustees vote on anything outside the B1 and B2,
Exactly.
but not any of the other commissions. Okay.
Correct. Well, no, the, outside of the business districts, Preservation and Landscape would retain their advisory review capacity, and then the Public Works Director would bring it to us for final decision.
Oh, I see, together with advisory and staff comments?
Right.
So where does it, so that part wasn't changed from the code?
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
that's what I'm missing. All right, sorry. I'm getting there, I really am.
No, we're not in any hurry. That's why we're here.
I think that's probably it. I just had one other general question, and that is, there's no mention of the approved planting list, and I completely agree with that in the business districts, we should be able to plant what is really going to thrive there and what is really going to spruce up the business districts. But we also give the Director of Public Works the right to determine the plantings for the areas outside, right?
No.
No.
It's just for the business district.
So outside the business district, there's still an approved plantings list?
Correct.
There is a preferred planting.
Preferred plantings list that has to be followed?
Right.
Okay, that hasn't changed?
No.
Because it's not really mentioned that way, but that's still part of the old code that wasn't changed?
Yes.
Okay, that must have been my confusion, because the old code wasn't in here. Okay.
Well, but let's press that just a second, because the one of the things that's interesting that I kind of learned as I was going through all this is that the planting list, you know, we fall into a habit of calling it the permitted planting list. And
Preferred.
It's a preferred planting
Right.
list. So with the Director of Public Works could bring a recommendation to plant something that's not on the preferred planting list.
Right, but
Outside of the business.
he or she is still governed initially by, or not governed, but asked to review the preferred planting list.
Exactly.
Jackie's got it, so yeah. And so the Landscape Advisory Commission then still has the role of adding or subtracting from the preferred planting
Exactly.
list. And then the director still looks at that and then can come and say, we need a different kind of tree, or we need a different kind of flower.
And not to get too far ahead of the game here, since we're focusing on this, the next two that we're going to be looking at will be the Landscape Advisory Commission and the Preservation Commission. And there are substantial clarifications with regard to LAC about their specific authority with regard to the landscape, not part of the business districts. So that will become much clearer, even more clear than it is now in our existing.
Okay, because that was a concern, so that will be addressed later.
Yes.
All right.
Earlier, we had an Eagle Scout who did the project between the bank and the empanadas. So with this, the Public Works Director could have just approved that, and he would not have had to go through all the
Exactly.
hoops that he went through. Okay, good.
Although it was kind of fun to listen to him talk.
The poor kid went to every,
Yeah, he went to every commission, I
Right,
know.
to get
But
approval
it was
for
nice,
that.
it was fun to hear him,
He
yeah.
just thought we'll still be required to come,
Yeah.
but not under anything that, as part of his project, because he does have to give a presentation to an elected body discussing the proposed work. and
Right,
then-
but I understand, he doesn't have to go, or
Right.
doesn't have to go to every commission in town to do it,
right.
yeah.
Okay, well, with that then, this will now go to the Plan Commission for their public hearing. So anyone who's interested in commenting on this, I encourage you to go to the Plan Commission public hearing on December 17th. It will be duly posted, and then this will be back before us for a decision on December 19th. Does anyone have any new business? Hearing none, we do have need for an executive session this evening to consider the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the public body, and to consider setting the price for sale or lease of village property, and also to consider the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, or to hear testimony on a complaint alleged against an employee to determine its validity. So I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, not to reconvene. No final action will be taken in executive session.
So moved.
Motion by Ms.
Second.
Sussman, second by Ms. Hamilton. Please call the roll.
Trustee Sussman.
Aye.
Trustee Hamilton.
Aye.
Trustee Pollak.
Aye.
Trustee Collins.
Aye.
Trustee Foley.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Holiday stroll tomorrow night, 5:30.